Dr. Sarachun had seen many things during her 3 years aboard the intergalactic research vessel Harmony. She had witnessed the delicate mating dances of crystalline beings from Proxima 7, documented the migration patterns of gas-based life forms near the Horsehead Nebula, and even helped deliver the first recorded hybrid offspring between two previously thought incompatible species. But nothing had prepared her for the sight that greeted her when she entered Research Base 7. The massive Krillian ambassador, Thektar, stood frozen in the center of the room, his usually imposing 8-foot frame trembling. His chitinous exoskeleton, normally a confident deep purple, had shifted to pale lavender, a clear sign of distress among his people. Around him, the various alien dignitaries and crew members formed a wide circle, their faces displaying expressions ranging from terror to barely contained panic. At the center of it all, sitting calmly on the polished metal floor, was what appeared to be a small, furry creature no larger than a house cat. It had the general body structure of a mammal, with soft gray fur marked by distinctive black stripes. Large, curious amber eyes dominated its rounded face, and its tail swished back and forth with apparent contentment. "Nobody move," whispered Captain Vexhai, the ship's Altarian commander, his usually melodious voice tight with strain. His scaled hands hovered over his sidearm, though he seemed reluctant to draw it. "Security teams are en route." Sarah pushed through the crowd, her medical instincts overriding the obvious tension in the room. "What exactly is going on here?" she asked, keeping her voice low but steady. The Krillian ambassador turned his massive head toward her, his compound eyes reflecting the overhead lights like dozens of tiny mirrors. "Human physician," he said, his translated voice carrying an unusual tremor. "You must not approach. That creature, it is a Vexhai cub." Sarah felt her eyebrows rise. She had heard of the Vexhai during her xenobiology studies, but they were considered more legend than fact. According to the sparse records available, they were apex predators from a world so dangerous that even the most advanced civilizations gave it a wide berth. Their homeworld, Keth Prime, was supposedly a death trap where the very plants could dissolve bone, and the weather systems regularly produced acid storms capable of eating through starship hulls. "I thought the Vexhai were extinct," Sarah said, studying the small creature more carefully. It certainly didn't look like the nightmarish descriptions she had read in her textbooks. "Not extinct," corrected Dr. Zefix, the ship's chief xenobiologist. The insectoid scholar's antennae twitched nervously as he spoke. "Simply unreachable. Their home world is protected by a planetary defense system that has destroyed every probe or expedition sent there for the past 2 centuries. The cub, seemingly oblivious to the fear it was inspiring, began exploring its surroundings with typical feline curiosity. It padded over to where Ambassador Thektar stood and rubbed against one of his massive legs, purring softly. The sound sent visible shudders through several of the assembled aliens. "How did it even get aboard?" asked Lieutenant Commander Urix, the ship's security chief. Her tentacles writhed with agitation as she spoke into her communicator, ordering additional security sweeps. Captain Vexhai gestured toward a nearby viewport. "We detected a small escape pod drifting in space approximately 6 hours ago. Standard protocol dictated we investigate. The pod appeared damaged, possibly from a collision with space debris. When we brought it aboard for examination, this creature was inside." Sarah moved closer, ignoring the sharp intakes of breath from the assembled crowd. The cub looked up at her approach, its amber eyes meeting hers with an intelligence that seemed almost knowing. There was something about its expression that reminded her of the stray cats she had rescued back on Earth, a combination of wariness and hope. "The legends speak of their kind as unstoppable killing machines," Dr. Zefix continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "They say a single adult Vexhai can level entire city blocks when angered. Their claws can cut through quantum steel, their bite can crush battle armor, and their speed is beyond measurement." The cub tilted its head at the sound of voices, then began moving towards Sarah with unhurried steps. She could see the other beings in the room tense, ready to flee or fight, but something about the creature's demeanor suggested it meant no harm. "It's just a baby," Sarah said softly, though she kept her voice steady for the benefit of the others. "Look at it. It's scared and alone." As if responding to her words, the cub let out a small mewling sound and approached her outstretched hand. The moment Sarah's fingers made contact with the cub's fur, several things happened at once. Ambassador Thektar let out a sound that could only be described as a terrified screech. Dr. Zefix began rapidly backing toward the exit, and Lieutenant Commander Urix drew her plasma weapon despite the captain's earlier hesitation. The cub, however, simply closed its eyes and leaned into Sarah's touch, purring with what seemed like genuine contentment. Its fur was impossibly soft, almost silky, and warm to the touch. Sarah could feel the rapid beating of its small heart beneath the gray coat. "Dr. Chun, step away from that creature immediately," Captain Vexai ordered, his voice carrying the full authority of his command. "You have no idea what it's capable of." Sarah didn't move. Instead, she gently scratched behind the cub's ears, noting how its purring intensified. "With respect, Captain, I think we're all making assumptions based on fear rather than observation. This little one hasn't shown any aggressive behavior. Because it's studying us," Dr. Zefix said from his position near the door. His complex eyes darted between Sarah and the cub. "Vexai are said to be incredibly intelligent. It could be analyzing our weaknesses before attacking." The cub opened its amber eyes and looked directly at Dr. Zefix, tilting its head as if it understood every word. Then it did something that sent another wave of panic through the room. It opened its mouth and made a sound that was clearly an attempt to mimic speech. "Human," it said, the words slightly distorted but unmistakably recognizable. Its gaze never left Sarah's face. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, not from fear, but from excitement. "Did you all hear that? It's trying to communicate." "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Dektar. "The reports say Vexai are purely predatory. They don't form social bonds with other species." The cub seemed to consider this statement, then looked at the Krillian ambassador with what could only be described as amusement. It made another sound, this one clearly attempting to mimic Thektar's chittering speech pattern, though it came out more like a musical trill. Sarah slowly lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the floor, bringing herself to the cub's eye level. "Hello there, little one," she said softly. "Can you understand me?" The response was immediate. The cub padded closer and, with surprising gentleness, reached out with one small paw to touch Sarah's face. Its claws, which according to legend should have been able to cut through quantum steel, barely made contact with her skin. Instead, it seemed to be exploring the texture of her features with scientific curiosity. "The escape pod," Captain Vexai said suddenly, his voice carrying a new note of urgency. "We need to examine it more thoroughly. If this cub was fleeing something." His words trailed off as the implications sank in. The assembled crowd began murmuring among themselves in various languages and communication methods. What could possibly force a Vexai, even a young one, to flee its homeworld? Dr. Zefix, emboldened by the cub's continued peaceful behavior, began approaching cautiously with his tricorder. "If I could get some readings," he began, but stopped when the cub turned its attention to the device. Instead of the destructive reaction everyone expected, the cub seemed fascinated by the tricorder's soft beeping. It moved closer to investigate, sniffing at the device with obvious curiosity. When Dr. Zefix held it lower, the cub gently batted at the scanning array with its paw, producing a series of musical chimes from the device. "Remarkable," Dr. Zefix breathed, studying his readings. "Its neural activity is off the charts. The complexity of its brain patterns rivals those of the most advanced species in the galactic community. But there's something else." He paused, adjusting his equipment settings. "I'm detecting trace amounts of quantum residue in its fur. This creature has been exposed to some form of advanced technology recently." Lieutenant Commander Urix finally holstered her weapon, though she remained alert. Could that explain how it survived in space? The escape pod showed signs of significant damage. The cub seemed to understand that it was being discussed. It looked around the room, at each face in turn, as if taking inventory of everyone present. When its gaze returned to Sarah, it moved closer and gently grasped the fabric of her sleeve between its teeth. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Every alien in the room either screamed, chittered, or made their species equivalent of a panic sound. Weapons were drawn. Emergency alarms began blaring, and Sarah could hear the thunder of running feet as security teams approached. But Sarah felt only the gentle pressure of small teeth against fabric. The cub wasn't biting her. It was trying to get her attention. When she looked down into those intelligent amber eyes, she could see something that looked remarkably like frustration mixed with determination. "It's okay," Sarah said, addressing both the cub and the panicking room. "Look, everyone, it's not hurting me." The cub released her sleeve and sat back on its haunches. Then, to everyone's amazement, it began to speak again. This time, the words were clearer, more carefully formed. "Help them, please." The simple plea, spoken in a voice that was obviously struggling with unfamiliar sounds, brought absolute silence to the room. Sarah felt her breath catch as the implications of those 3 words sank in. This wasn't just a lost cub. This was a refugee, and it was asking for help. The emergency meeting that followed took place in the ship's main conference room, with the cub, whom Sarah had begun privately calling Scout, curled up in her lap like an oversized house cat. The sight of a human calmly stroking the fur of what was supposedly one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators had left most of the crew in a state of bewildered fascination. Captain Vexhai paced at the head of the table, his scaled features tight with concern. Around the table sat the ship's senior staff, various diplomatic representatives, and several xenobiology experts who had been hastily summoned from other sections of the vessel. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," the captain said, his voice carefully controlled. "According to the preliminary analysis of the escape pod's navigational data, this cub traveled approximately 12 parsecs from the direction of the Keth Prime system. That's well beyond any previously recorded Vexhai activity." Dr. Zefix nodded, his antennae twitching as he consulted his datapad. "The quantum residue analysis suggests the pod was launched in extreme haste. There are traces of what appears to be weapons fire damage to the hull, though the metal composition is unlike anything in our databases." Sarah gently scratched behind Scout's ears, noting how the small creature seemed to relax at her touch. "The important thing is what Scout said. Help them, please. It's clearly trying to communicate something urgent." Ambassador Thektar, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the initial encounter, finally spoke. "With respect to your expertise, Dr. Chun, we may be anthropomorphizing the creature's behavior. The ability to mimic speech doesn't necessarily indicate true comprehension." As if in direct response to this statement, Scout lifted its head and looked directly at the Krillian ambassador. In a voice that was becoming clearer with each attempt, it said, "Thektar, afraid, no need fear." The ambassador's compound eyes widened, and his exoskeleton shifted to a deeper shade of purple. "It knows my name. More than that," Dr. Zefix observed excitedly. "It's demonstrating contextual understanding." It recognized that Ambassador Thektar was expressing doubt and addressed him specifically. Captain Vexhai stopped pacing and turned to face the group. "The question remains, what exactly is it asking us to help with? And do we have any obligation to respond to such a request?" Lieutenant Commander Urix cleared her throat. "Sir, I've been reviewing our sensor logs from when we first detected the escape pod. There were unusual energy readings in the background cosmic radiation, subtle, but definitely artificial in origin. If I didn't know better, I'd say something massive was moving through space in that region." Sarah felt Scout tense in her lap. The cub's purring stopped, and its ears flattened against its head. When she looked down, she saw that its amber eyes had taken on a distinctly worried expression. "What is it, Scout?" she asked softly. The cub looked up at her, then around the room at the assembled beings. It took a deep breath, as if gathering courage, then spoke again. Ship, big ship, hunting, family trapped. The words sent a chill through the room. Dr. Zefix leaned forward, his scientific excitement warring with obvious concern. Are you saying your family is in danger? Scout nodded, a gesture that it had clearly learned from observing the humans aboard the ship. Bad ones take family experiment, hurt. Sarah felt her stomach clench. The picture Scout was painting was becoming disturbingly clear. Someone is capturing your people. Not someone, Scout said, its voice growing stronger with determination. Wraith Collective. The reaction to those two words was immediate and dramatic. Ambassador Thektar actually stumbled backward, his chair clattering to the floor. Captain Vexhi's scales paled to almost white, and several of the other delegates began speaking in rapid, panicked whispers in their native tongues. Sarah looked around the room in confusion. I take it that name means something to all of you? Dr. Zefix set down his datapad with trembling hands. The Wraith Collective is their raiders, slavers, and worse. They operate from the dark spaces between star systems, preying on isolated colonies and ships. But they've never been bold enough to attack a world as defended as Keth Prime. Unless, Captain Vexhi said grimly, they found a way to neutralize those defenses. Scout whimpered softly, a sound that tugged at Sarah's heart. She gathered the small creature closer, feeling its rapid heartbeat against her chest. You escaped to find help, didn't you? She whispered. Smart human, Scout said, nuzzling against her shoulder. Others not understand, fear too much, but human different, humankind, human help. The weight of Scout's trust settled on Sarah's shoulders like a mantle. Around the table, the various representatives and crew members were engaged in heated discussions about protocols, jurisdictions, and the political implications of intervention. We can't possibly mount a rescue mission based on the word of a single creature, Ambassador Thektar was saying. The diplomatic ramifications alone. But if the Wraith Collective has found a way to break through Vexhi defenses, Dr. Zefix countered, what's to stop them from targeting other worlds? Other species. Sarah stood up, still cradling Scout, and the room gradually fell silent. There's something you're all missing, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority she had learned in medical school. This isn't just about politics or protocols. Scout didn't choose to approach any of you when that escape pod was opened. Scout chose to trust humans. She looked down at the small creature in her arms. The question isn't whether we have the authority to help. The question is whether we have the courage to try. Scout raised its head and looked directly at Captain Vexhi. In a voice that carried surprising dignity for such a small creature, it said, Please, Captain, family dying, only humans brave enough, help Vexhi. 3 hours later, the Harmony had been transformed from a peaceful research vessel into something resembling a military operation. Sarah stood in the primary shuttle bay, watching as teams of engineers made rapid modifications to their fastest reconnaissance ship. Scout remained perched on her shoulder, having refused to leave her side since the conference room meeting. The plan that had emerged from the heated discussions was ambitious and dangerous. Using the navigational data from Scout's escape pod, they would approach the Keth Prime system under minimal power, hoping to avoid detection by whatever forces had managed to penetrate the legendary Vexhi defenses. A small team would attempt to gather intelligence and, if possible, mount a rescue operation. Captain Vexhi approached, his expression grim but determined. The decision to proceed had not been unanimous. Several of the diplomatic representatives had lodged formal protests that would likely follow them for years. But Scout's desperate plea, combined with the broader implications of Wraith Collective expansion, had ultimately swayed the captain. Dr. Chun, he said, his melodious voice carrying an unusual note of uncertainty. I want you to understand that what we're attempting goes far beyond normal protocols. If we're captured or killed, then we'll have died trying to do something right, Sarah interrupted, gently stroking Scout's fur. Besides, we have an advantage the Wraith Collective doesn't expect. The captain's scaled brow ridge rose in question. Sarah smiled and gestured to Scout. "We have a native guide who knows the system better than any star chart." Scout chirped softly and nuzzled against Sarah's cheek. Over the past few hours, its vocabulary had expanded remarkably. Dr. Zefix theorized that Vexhai had incredibly rapid language acquisition abilities, possibly evolved to help them adapt to new hunting territories. "Sarah friend correct," Scout said, its pronunciation improving with each sentence. "No secret paths through asteroid fields. No hidden places where family might hide." Lieutenant Commander Urix joined them, carrying a modified weapon harness. "Dr. Chun, I still think you should reconsider coming on this mission. Your linguistic connection with the cub is invaluable, but the risks are exactly why I need to be there," Sarah finished. "Scout, trust me. If we encounter other Vexhai, that trust might be the difference between rescue and disaster." Dr. Zefix hurried over, his antennae practically vibrating with excitement. "The preliminary scans of the escape pod's quantum residue have yielded fascinating results. I believe I've identified the energy signature of the weapons used against Keth Prime's defenses." He handed Sarah a datapad displaying complex waveform analyses. "This technology is definitely Wraith Collective in origin, but it's been modified with components I don't recognize. Someone has given them significantly advanced weaponry." Scout examined the datapad with obvious intelligence, its amber eyes tracking the scrolling data. Suddenly, it let out a sharp growl and pointed one small claw at a specific energy signature pattern. "Bad weapon," it said, its voice tight with what could only be anger. "Hurt planet shield. Make big holes. Wraiths come through holes like water." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "You saw this happen?" Scout's ears flattened against its head, and for a moment, the small creature looked far older than its apparent age. "Watch from safe place. See family fighting. See many fall. Elders tell Scout to run. Find help, bring warriors back." The weight of responsibility in those words was staggering. An entire civilization had placed their hopes in a small cub's desperate journey across the galaxy. Captain Vexhai checked his chrono. "We have 30 minutes until departure. Final team roster includes myself, Lieutenant Commander Urix, Dr. Zefix, Engineer Karath, and Dr. Chun with Scout." "What about backup?" Sarah asked. "The Harmony will remain at the edge of the system with emergency crews standing by. If we don't report back within 48 hours, they're ordered to return to the nearest Federation outpost and call for a full military response." Scout suddenly perked up, its head tilted as if listening to something none of the others could hear. "Wait," it said urgently. "Something wrong. Feel vibrations through ship." Before anyone could ask what it meant, alarms began blaring throughout the shuttle bay. The ship's intercom crackled to life with the voice of the bridge communications officer. "All stations, we have multiple contacts dropping out hyperspace. Unknown configuration vessels approaching at high speed. Battle stations, this is not a drill." Through the shuttle bay's viewing ports, Sarah could see the distinctive angular silhouettes of Wraith Collective ships materializing against the star field. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb light, making them appear like holes torn in space itself. Scout let out a keening wail that sent chills through everyone present. Too late. They followed Scout. They track escape pod. Captain Vexhai was already running toward the modified shuttle, shouting orders. "Emergency departure. All teams to the ship now." Sarah found herself swept along in the chaos, Scout clinging tightly to her shoulder as crew members rushed to complete pre-flight checks in record time. Through the growing din of emergency preparations, she could hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons charging. "Dr. Chun," Dr. Zefix called out as he strapped himself into the shuttle's co-pilot seat. "We're going to have to launch in the middle of a battle." Sarah secured herself and Scout in the passenger compartment just as the shuttle's engines roared to life. Through the small viewport beside her seat, she could see the first exchange of weapons fire between the Harmony and the Wraith ships. "Sarah, friend," Scout said, its voice small but determined. "Scout, sorry. Bring danger to good ship." Sarah gathered the small creature into her arms, holding it close as the shuttle lurched into space. You didn't bring danger, Scout. You brought hope. And sometimes hope is worth fighting for. As their small ship accelerated away from the battle, dodging between enemy vessels that seemed more interested in the larger research ship, Sarah realized that their mission had transformed from a careful reconnaissance into a desperate race against time. Behind them, the Harmony continued its fighting retreat, buying them precious minutes to reach the Keth Prime system. Ahead lay a world under siege, where Scout's family waited for a rescue that might be their only chance for survival. The small cub pressed against her chest, its purring barely audible over the sound of the engines, but its trust in her remained absolute. Whatever waited for them in the darkness of space, they would face it together. The Keth Prime system was a graveyard. As their shuttle emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates Scout had provided, Sarah felt her heart sink at the sight before them. The legendary planetary defense grid that had protected the Vexi homeworld for centuries hung in pieces, massive metal fragments drifting like broken teeth against the backdrop of space. By the ancestors, whispered Engineer Karoth, his crystalline features flickering with bioluminescent distress patterns. How could anyone break through those defenses? Scout pressed against the viewport, its small body trembling as it surveyed the destruction. Home, it whispered, the single word carrying a weight of loss that needed no translation. Captain Vexi piloted their modified shuttle through the debris field with expert precision, following Scout's guidance toward hidden asteroid clusters where survivors might have taken refuge. The Wraith Collective ships that patrolled the system moved in systematic patterns, clearly conducting sweeps for any remaining resistance. There, Scout said suddenly, pointing with one small paw toward what appeared to be an empty section of space. Hidden station. Family there. Feel their minds. Sarah looked where Scout indicated, but saw nothing. Are you sure? In response, Scout began making a series of complex chirping and trilling sounds, clearly some form of communication that went beyond the speech it had learned from the humans. Almost immediately, a section of what had appeared to be empty space shimmered and revealed a cleverly camouflaged station built into a large asteroid. Remarkable, Dr. Zephyx breathed. Active camouflage technology integrated with natural rock formations. No wonder the Wraith ships haven't found them. As they approached, Sarah could see that the station was heavily damaged. Atmosphere leaked from several breaches, and what had once been elegant docking bays were now twisted wreckage. But there were signs of life. Emergency lights flickered in some sections, and she could see movement behind reinforced viewports. Scout, Captain Vexi said carefully, "We need to know how many Vexi are in there and what their condition is." Scout closed its eyes and went very still. When it opened them again, its expression was a mixture of relief and pain. 43 family members alive. Many hurt. Little food. Air running out soon. Can you communicate with them? Let them know we're here to help. Scout nodded and resumed its complex vocalizations. Almost immediately, a docking bay door began to cycle open, though the process was clearly labored. What Sarah saw when they entered the station challenged everything she thought she knew about the Vexi. The beings that greeted them were indeed impressive in size and bearing, but they moved with obvious exhaustion and pain. Many bore wounds that spoke of desperate fighting, and their eyes held the hollow look of people who had lost almost everything. But when they saw Scout, the transformation was immediate and profound. The small cub leaped from Sarah's arms and was immediately surrounded by adults whose relief was palpable. The sounds they made, a complex harmony of purrs, chirps, and deeper vocalizations, needed no translation. An elderly Vexi, her gray fur marked with what appeared to be ritual scars, approached Sarah directly. When she spoke, her voice carried the same musical quality as Scout's, but with decades of experience behind it. "Human friend," she said, her pronunciation careful but clear. "Scout tells of your kindness. Iaima matriarch Kazara. You have brought our child home." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Scout brought us here, matriarch. We're here to help." "Help? Another Vex High, this one bearing obvious battle wounds, approached with skeptical caution. 50 ships full of Wraiths patrol our system. They have weapons that tear through our strongest defenses like they are paper. What else can you offer? Before Sarah could respond, Scout bounded over and began speaking rapidly in the Vex High language. The wounded warrior's expression changed from skepticism to amazement as the cub apparently recounted their journey and the events aboard the Harmony. Captain Vex High stepped forward. We may not have the firepower to fight the Wraith fleet directly, but we have something they don't expect: cooperation between species. Are you willing to work with us? Matriarch Keshera's amber eyes studied each member of the rescue team in turn. The Wraiths believe we are a dying species, trapped and helpless. They do not expect us to have allies. This may be the advantage we need. Dr. Zephix consulted his tricorder. The station's life support systems are failing. We have perhaps 6 hours before atmosphere becomes critical. Then, we need to move fast, Lieutenant Commander Urich said. What assets do you have left? The matriarch gestured to a younger Vex High who had been quietly observing the exchange. My daughter, Kaliseth, commands our last functional warship. It has been hidden in the asteroid field, but it lacks the power to fight so many enemies alone. Scout suddenly perked up, its ears standing at attention. Wait, Sarah friend, remember Big Ship? Harmony fighting Wraiths when we left. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Captain, what if the Harmony is still out there? Still fighting? Captain Vex High activated his communication array, sending out a carefully coded transmission. For several tense minutes, there was nothing but static. Then, crackling through the interference, came a familiar voice. This is Commander Urich aboard the Harmony. Captain, are you receiving? Commander, what's your status? We've been playing a running battle with the Wraith fleet for the past 8 hours. They keep expecting us to retreat, but we've been using hit-and-run tactics to keep them occupied. Several of the alien dignitaries have turned out to be quite skilled tacticians. Sarah smiled despite their desperate situation. Even Ambassador Thektar, especially Ambassador Thektar. Apparently, Krillians have some very creative ideas about warfare. Matriarch Keshera had been listening with obvious interest. A battle fleet engaged with the Wraiths would be distracted, vulnerable to attack from an unexpected direction. What are you proposing? Captain Vex High asked. A coordinated strike. Your ship attacks from the system's edge, drawing their attention. Our warship attacks from within the asteroid field. In the confusion, your shuttle evacuates the survivors. Scout bounced with excitement. Yes, good plan. Scout guides shuttle through secret paths while family fights. Dr. Zephix checked his readings again. The plan has merit, but we're still dealing with impossible odds. Even with coordination, we're talking about 2 ships against 50. Kaliseth, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Not 2 ships. 3. Plus something the Wraiths have never encountered. She gestured to Sarah and her team. Humans. Scout has told us stories. Your species does not know when to surrender. You fight when others flee. You hope when others despair. Sarah felt the weight of expectation from dozens of Vex High eyes. We're just researchers and diplomats. No, Scout said firmly, moving to stand beside her. Sarah friend and others are warriors. Human warriors who came to help when no one else would. Matriarch Keshera nodded slowly. Then, we will fight together. Vex High and human side by side. If this is our last battle, at least it will be one worth remembering. As the various teams began preparing for what might be the most desperate rescue mission in galactic history, Sarah found herself holding Scout close once more. The small cub looked up at her with absolute trust. Ready for adventure, Sarah friend? Sarah smiled, feeling a courage she didn't know she possessed. Ready, Scout. Let's bring your family home. Above them, the stars bore witness as an unlikely alliance prepared to face impossible odds, united by the simple belief that some things, family, friendship, and hope, were worth fighting for, no matter the cost.